But I find Hollywood doesn't really understand horror. They can't quite process that it truly is about dark things. And that leaves an opportunity for an independent filmmaker to address.
Yeah, I think that definitely bleeds into this film a lot too. You know, like a lot of the tricks he taught me, I used in this film, and I will use for the rest of my life.
Charlie! Charlie! Stay with me, man!
So, Larry, what made you want to tell this story through the lens of the classic werewolf tale?
I just love monster movies, and big and small. I like Godzilla movies, but I like werewolves and Frankenstein. I grew up on that was the diet in the 70s. The old black and white movies in particular obviously went on to the 80s werewolves and all that good stuff. But I was very influenced by the early films. So I've been kind of, just as an artist, I call back to my youth, the early impressions of my youth. I don't just make these movies. I also was obsessed with the Wendigo for years, and I made several Wendigo movies. But I just love the Wolfman. I think Frankenstein is a favorite because of the Karloff portrayal. But, I really related to the Wolfman as a kid and Lon Chaney's pathos. So I'm just interested in sort of updating those. I'm not really stuck in the past. I want to make contemporary films. I love Martin Scorsese growing up later. After I finally got out of the house, I would go to the real movies in the theater and those. So trying to bring that gritty realism, so to speak, and that dynamic camera work and contemporary themes, more ambiguity, seems like a perfect blend to me, and no one's really doing it. So I'm happy to carry the whole for a while.
Yeah.
I know there is a Wolfman movie in the works that maybe Gosling's going to play it, so that'd be cool. Of course, it's fun, but I find Hollywood doesn't really understand horror. They can't quite process that it truly is about dark things, and that leaves an opportunity for an independent filmmaker to address.
Well, and I should state too, I'm also very excited to talk to you today because I've had multiple actors bring you up. So you are very, very beloved in the genre. Yeah, both Barbara Crampton and Danielle Harris had very, very nice things to say about you. So I'm curious too, when it comes to creating a werewolf movie, how do you balance the tropes with carving your own unique path and identity for the film? Because obviously you want to pay homage to all the classic werewolf tropes, but then you also want to then have this originality. So how do you balance those? Alex, this can go to you as well for your performance.
I'm going to let Larry take this one, but it's really nice to meet you, Tyler. Go for it, Larry. How do you do that, Maestro?
Well, it actually is related to Alex. You want to make the casting is the most important way to access something real about these mythological, and if you will, tired old tropes. So, you have to so I'm not so much attributing as it's just in my DNA, the initial stories and all the iterations. There's obviously Lon Chaney played the monster more than any other. Frankenstein's monster was played by guys people as time went on through the series in the 30s and 40s. But Chaney was always the Wolfman, which is kind of sweet. And there's something that I like about that, the serious element. As you can see, I like to do things. Now I'm talking about my monsterverse because I made by chance a Frankenstein movie. But there again, it was the casting. I was lucky enough to find Alex Bro to play a modern Frankenstein's monster, and it was really the pathos that he brought to it that made that film worth even watching because it did bring a new vitality to the story. Yeah. And again, I had known Alex for quite a while and discovered that he liked the old movies, so that was a starting point. But we also had some history in common in terms of our life struggles, and he also has a larger than life father figure, which is another sort of thematic element that interests me. But just to answer your question, I look at the monster. What is the essence of the monster? What are the dilemmas that it will be going through? What would this do be dealing with if he couldn't remember being a werewolf, but starts to believe that he is one. So I just try to find psychological realism, and that's where the reinvention comes from.
I love that you went with the more Lon Chaney version of the creature. And so, Alex, did you do a lot of research into like Lon Chaney's performance? Because it really feels like there's a lot of Lon Chaney in that.
So one of the ways that Larry and I first connected was I worked with his son Jack on another film, which he was producing. And when I got up to their house in Woodstock for the first time, I walked into the bathroom, and he has all these miniatures above the John of every great monster ever, and I started like bugging out. Yeah, there. Oh my god, did you bring that down for luck? And good, yeah, just you bring it tonight. Okay. So I just like went to him, and I knew the only film I'd known about before I met Larry was Havoc, which had always been like this amazing film that I just happened on. But I went to him and just was like, how did you manifest this beautiful like museum to some of the greatest, most imaginary, the way those filmmakers were making movies, it just has always touched me. And like when I said this earlier today, so like I'm sorry to bore you, but basically I saw Frankenstein when I was 5. Boris Karloff's Monster rocked me. That's when I was like, oh, acting is magic. Acting is special. There's something about acting that really connects to me and my soul. And so we clicked on that. When I was growing up, I was a Universal freak because basically my godfather was a total nerd, and he raised me. I mean, he has a very good collection to match Larry's. They're going to meet for the first time tonight. I'm like sort of worried about it. I'm like, but because like the two of them are just gonna, and I think at this point, like Larry's not as much on that, bent as my Uncle Bo is. But like my Uncle Bo has a full, beautiful, like one of the best busts of Karloff in the makeup that you've ever seen. Yeah. Anyway, so moving on. So my childhood was part of my work into getting ready for this film. And then in preparation, Larry asked me to do this 2 years prior to filming, a year and a half prior to filming. I the phone fell out of my hand kind of situation. Like he was like, "Hey, so I'm thinking about what." I was just like, "What is happening to me?" Yes, duh, I'm there. And I watched all of. I think Lon Chaney has 5 Is it 5? I mean, he made TV appearances too, so I've seen those as well. And we definitely were inspired by his work, but a lot of the movement came out of Larry's mind and me just being like, what do you see? What do you want? And, he sent me this amazing artwork from a comic book he'd had as a child that he kept. And he talked about Bob Fosse, and then we hired a choreographer to come on and help me. Oh my God, you still have it. At night, by night. And so that's sort of what we went for. And at first, because I saw that art, I started training to beef up, thinking that like, oh God, like if we're going to do this without, crazy CG and all the stuff, like no frills, like I gotta, so I got a personal trainer, and I started gaining, like I put on like 30 pounds of muscle, like I went nuts. And then, as we were getting closer to the film, I was like, Larry, it doesn't feel right. Like I want to be able to move more. And he was like, yes, I prefer it. Lose it all. Like get really thin. And so I dropped as much weight as I possibly could. I basically ate one meal at Alex Bro's dietary and gym, because Alex Bro and I are buddies too. Basically, we're best. He's one of my best friends in the whole wide world.
I had Frankenstein training Wolf.
So Frankenstein's monster trained me. And basically he was like, dude, you just got to eat one meal a day, and you got to work out twice a day. And like, this is what you got to do. And so I did it. And yeah. And it all worked out. I think it's a beautiful representation, and an homage to the great artists that made those films. A lot of it had to do just with Larry's writing. That broke the genre because it had so much more to do with the time and psychological aspects, and also cultural aspects of what goes into gender, racial divides, environmental situations, political situations, which are happening right now and are just like so clear and obvious to everyone, no matter what side of the fence you're on. I don't think he really even takes a stance. He just is like, this is what is real. And I think that's sort of lovely. Like, they don't do that as much. It's just, even a man who is pure of heart, like, which, I love her, Maria Ospensky. She was a Stanislavski. So, I love the Stanislavski actors. And, yeah. So, but, this is more, what's the internal workings of that? And, so for me, like, it was like, it's indie film, like, how authentic can I be? How simple can I be? How much can I think these thoughts when I'm saying them? How much can I have this guilt and shame and remorse and doubt that I might actually be a wolfman, or I might just be a psychotic who is killing people as myself in these moments when I drink myself into oblivion. Like, and as someone who's had a little experience with that, I completely get it. I really get that. And especially coming out of the grief of a dying father. Like, my father had just passed away when we made this film not too long before, wrestling with that, and understanding the rage that comes out when you don't understand your feelings. Mm-hmm. That really, I think, got itself into the DNA of this film as well. Wanting to do right, wanting to have values and principles, but not understanding how to really get yourself on a path towards changing your situation.
It seems like, too, being able to use your the archive photos from your childhood for your character, it seems like that's almost like a cheat code for the film itself, because you're automatically able to connect with your father, because it's like, oh, William Hurt. Yes, I've seen him for the last however many years in cinema. So it's that connection just is immediately there. So it works very, very well.
And he was a serious actor. He was a really serious actor. And that was something I respected about him and that we connected on. I try to have a little bit more fun when I'm doing work, because I find that fun overpowers fear, and that fun leads to a more creative environment for a set, like being welcoming, being kind. I think that when actors, for me, when I'm an actor who's being too serious, other people they sort of are like, I don't want to, get involved with you. Like, do I need to call you Charlie? And that's all fine. I love that actors go that serious. When actors are like that around me, I'm like, oh yeah, like, I'm going to mess with you. This is great. But for me, the choice I've made is to have more fun. But that doesn't mean that my preparation is any less serious. My preparation is just as serious. And I was inspired by the hard work he would do when he was getting ready for a project. And yeah, I think that definitely bleeds into this film a lot too. Like, a lot of the tricks he taught me, I used in this film, and I will use for the rest of my life.
I think one thing that an independent film can have is, you don't have the budget and some of the bells and whistles, but you potentially can access other things. And I feel like the incredible synchronicity of having Alex's dad sort of referenced, as you say, then the audience suddenly has a history with the father. And that's all I'm saying, is that there's certain things you can access without money, but just with the synchronicity of life.
Yeah, with the amount of vulnerability you can bring to the thing. And that was the thing that about Habit that always sort of rocked my heart. Like it really just like broke my heart open was, I think, the immense vulnerability that Larry brought to that film. I mean, he is, I don't think I'm outing you here. I hope I'm not. He's really afraid of heights, and like having to be out that dangling out that window was truly horrific for him. Um, you know, those photos in that film that he has, those are photos of his father. And I didn't feel like I could like really bring all of my like the service, my will forces to be of service to this picture unless I was willing to do that. And of course I got consent from my siblings about it and made sure like it was all kosher with them, and showed them the script, and they were like, absolutely, this is a great way to honor dad. Like we are on board with this. Like do it, go for it.
That's awesome. Well, it works very well in the film. Very, very well.
Yeah, I mean, it messes me up, man. Like I watched it a couple weeks ago, this final cut version of it. And actually yesterday was the second anniversary of his dying. And it was, yeah, it's heavy, man. It's good.
Yeah. Well, I'm very sorry for your loss.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
I do.
And Larry, what made you decide to not take on an acting role in the film?
Well, there's a couple things. One is I'm too old to run around. It's sad. But also, in the back of my mind, I am creating a monsterverse, so I can't repeat actors. And I hope to deliver on that promise next, which is to say, there's some people that can't reoccur. I guess I'm one of them. I'm not following exactly. I'm in the trade about second. But yeah, of course I would have liked to play the werewolf, but this is one of the only real regrets about getting old is it's not appropriate anymore. Really, I hope I've conveyed. Finding Alex made the movie seem possible because I felt that ultimately these are portraits, just as Havoc is a self-portrait, perhaps. I feel like Blackout, for all the werewolf talk and Lon Chaney talk, is really a portrait, obviously a slant rhyme of Alex's personality and his journey and his struggle. And the same with Depraved. It's a beautiful tribute to that actor to grow. So, that's what interests me. They're really, really like Cassavetes' versions of monster movies, which is only to reference an obvious hero of English cinema. Who, these are portraits, and I feel like it's a portrait of Alex, a slant rhyme, of course, through a filter of genre cliches, but in the end, I'm trying to capture something about these individuals, and so so you get the gist. And then I was just saying Cassavetes. I'm like making Cassavetes versions of old 1940s werewolf movies. Just what the public wants, I can assure you. You just look at those numbers. They've been craving for this.
Well, and I'm curious too, because I love the idea of the whole, like the blackouts and the alcoholism being a stand-in for the werewolf transformations. And so how long has that been an idea that's been like turning around in your head? And how much have you just like clenched whenever you've seen a werewolf movie release where you're like, oh, don't take my idea. Don't take my idea.
That's funny. I'm not possessive of my ideas because, well, I just know they come from a real place. So in other words, if someone else had done that, I'm trying to think. I mean, Worth with Jack Nicholson deals with some of these themes. The point is there's so many great themes in these horror movies. Alcohol is something I often reference because I have a relationship to it. But I also feel that it speaks of a life a little out of control and a struggle and sort of an otherness that's on your shoulder. So I come back to that theme. I mean, if I did Jekyll and Hyde, you couldn't avoid that theme yet again. And of course, I don't want to be an old, tired, flogging a dead horse. But I think alcoholism and addictions is something that we all have in common, whether we're sober or not. The human animal is almost teetering out of control and is very obsessive and not making the right moves. Unfortunately, we have climate change and terrible political problems, and I think there's a monstrosity to the human animal that. And then also the thing about the werewolf is that there's some sort of yearning for a connection to nature. I mean, some of the best shots in Blackout are just Alex running. You know, we'd say, in fact, I tend to script and map out everything quite carefully, but there's a couple of shots that we just added. I was driving home from location and I was like, oh my God, this field is so glorious. I said, Alex, do you mind when you got the makeup on, can we just have you running through this? So we just got the camera in the car and we were driving and he was just running extremely fast, very quickly. And it was a sign of this kind of the actual freedom of being a monster and just being more at one with nature. It's the other reason he's an artist in the film. That's another aspect of the movie. I feel like an artist is already somewhat outside of society because they're seeing humanity and they're connecting in a way that maybe an accountant isn't having that opportunity, at least in their vocation. So I wanted to suggest that artists are outsiders and then alcoholics are outsiders. So whatever, these are this. I guess the real point is I don't think anybody's going to steal those ideas from me. Since they're of no concern to anyone else.
Well, and you've had a very long career in the genre. Is there some film from your filmography that you felt was overlooked and wish that more people saw?
Well, it's funny you ask, and I'll just say this as an aside because I have so many chips on my shoulder. But, you know, every time, you know, every 3 months there's an article about movies and climate change, and they're like, they don't make any climate change movies and nobody cares about climate change. And I'm like, well, if you could just research for 30 seconds on the internet, you would know about my film, The Last Winter, which is a very passionate cry about those issues. Hopefully it works beyond being polemic. But yeah, so sometimes I get annoyed that people are lazy. And that is my biggest budget with Ron Perlman and Tony Britton and wonderful actors in it, James LeGros. So I wish that was known more and that had saved the world, but apparently not. The world has not been saved.
Well, I run a best horror movie you never saw channel, like a series on our JoBlo YouTube channel. So we'll make sure that we spotlight that on there. So,
okay. Well, you guys, you did just do Late Phases, which is a film, a werewolf movie a wonderful movie starring Nick D'Amici as an older guy, and that's another wonderful take on werewolf, the werewolf story. So thanks to JoBlo and you guys for citing that. Very pleased to see that movie brought up again.
Not a problem. We're also covering Stakeland, I think, next week. So yeah, we've got a lot of Larry Fessenden appreciation on the channel. So
those are the movies I make, the movies you've never heard of, but they're all fantastic. But because I produce through this same idea of like meeting artists who really care about telling personal and psychologically grounded stories, and that happen to be in the horror genre. Of course, I made all the early films of Ty West, and you're mentioning Jim Mickle, who's a fantastic filmmaker. He did Stakeland.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you're fighting those. It's good. And the nice thing is there's a whole new generation of kids who would appreciate them and think these are these strange, fully realized horror movies. You know, so awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you do. I love journalism and cinema lovers and all of that. That's what keeps making indie films even make any sense at all. It's people more interesting taste.
Well, that's why I do this job. I love movies like more than anything in the world. So, and finally, I have to ask about your involvement in Killers of the Flower Moon. It was very, very cool to see a horror guy pop up in such a prestigious film. So, how did that come about?
Well, I had been in another Scorsese film. I think he's so aware of the cinematic universe at every level, that he doesn't know who I am. He did say he liked Habit when I met him years ago. I'm also fortunate enough to come to mind by the casting director, Ellen Lewis. She put me in the Jarmusch zombie movie called The Dead Don't Die.
Yeah.
And she, I think, mentioned me to Scorsese, and he said, "Oh yeah, that'd be fun to have Fessenden in the movie." Long story short is that I was actually going to be on location in Oklahoma playing a sidekick to Leo's character, but no lines. I mean, nothing grandiose. But I was just going to be like a goon, a, a nasty white boy. And then they cut that character. So then I was sad, and then Ellen called and said, "But we think there's something else for you. It could be in this little radio play," which is funny because I've done radio plays, and that's another thing to draw your audience to is Tales from Beyond the Pale. We have 50 individual scary stories written by all kinds of people in the horror business, and Barbara Crampton's in those, and Ron Perlman, everybody, Doug Jones. So that's a great series. I recommend people look it up. Tales from Beyond the Pale. Anyway, that was fun. That of all things, I should be doing a radio play for the Scorsese picture. We filmed 4 days or so in the Bronx. It was fantastic. At his childhood, high school, and he was just, of course, wonderful. And he is my favorite living filmmaker. Hitchcock's I just had a blast.
Did you have any takeaways from being on a Scorsese set?
Honestly, yeah, you see, I mean, look, there's many ways to direct. We all know that Kubrick was a maniac, and 80 takes later and all of that. But the thing about Marty, he's so warm and so present. He knows everyone and everybody's business. He was teasing me about being a low-budget filmmaker. He knew Ty West and Kelly Reichardt, filmmakers I've worked with. He was, and then he'd go right over to Jack White, obviously the great musician, and he'd prattle on about music with him. So there's a warmth, and I think that's his secret trick to get people to give their all. So what I'm saying is he really leads through love and attention and just absolute dedication to the medium. It's infectious, all these obvious cliches. It's infectious in his love of cinema. And yet there's a seriousness to what's going on. He's concerned with moral issues and the craft. And so he just elevates his sense of excellence. And obviously his team is impeccable. And so I'm not sure. You only learned that the greats really have something special to offer.
Well, and I guess my last question for you both is, outside of Blackout, what upcoming projects can my audience keep an eye out for? Alex, I'll start with you.
I'm in the process of producing a film right now. It's a long process, as I'm sure you might know. But I'm pretty excited about it. It deals with I think it deals with postpartum in a way that has never been dealt with in a film before. And as like a dad who has a high respect for and awe of women and that process that happens, I'm really moved by the story. We're hoping to film in upstate New York in the fall. And so we're in the process of doing that right now. That film's the working title right now is Brink. And the director's calling it a spiritual thriller, which, I think that's a pretty cool idea. Nice. To develop a new genre. And the other thing I'm doing right now is I'm in a play called Patriot, which is on Broadway with Michael Stuhlbarg, Will Keane, Rupert Gould is directing it. And oh God, freaking genre-wise, I did a film called Test Screening, which is doing the festival circuit right now. And that's a horror thriller, very, very like The Thing-esque. I'm really excited by this film. Loved working with this director, Clark Baker. Yeah, that film is I don't know. I think it could be amazing. It's like set in the 80s. mostly about these kids in this town. They go to a test screening of a film that they all think is going to be the new Star Wars. And the government has put some alien thing into the film, and it affects people in the town. Yeah, I am psyched. It was great. And yeah, God, I got to play the father of one of the main characters. I'm really excited about that film. That one of the other best sets I've ever been on in my life. Just everyone so friendly, so professional, knowing what they're doing, trying to help out, getting other shots that were not on the shot list, because it's like, you know what, this will make this better through collaboration. And like, I don't know. I think that's one of the great things about being on an indie set is, if everyone's trusting each other, and you really know what you're doing, and a lot of those people do, like I mean, literally one of the makeup supervisor on that film went up to the director and was like, actually, I think you should get this shot of Alex's character. I think that will help tell the story. And he was like, you're absolutely right. We got to do that. That's a great idea. Let's go do that. Let's get that right now. And yeah, I just dig that. I mean, like one of the things I really pressed on Larry was, I was like, you got these streams in Woodstock. There's these streams with this cold water. Like, where's the moment where he where he understands who he is in this film? Like, you have the moment where you're out the window, dangling out the window and Habit. Like, where's my moment where I get to sacrifice something? And he was like, oh, that's great. You're going to jump into the water. We went there at like 7 a.m. The water was like, probably like, I don't know. I mean, freezing cold. And he's like, jump in, naked, go. Here we go. And I love that. I love that about indie films. So yeah, those are the test screening, coming to you as soon as possible, I hope. And then I'm doing Patriot, and then hopefully this next project that I'm working on will happen as it's meant to. I believe in it. I don't know. I think it could be really awesome. Actually, one of the producers on Blackout, Gabby Lehner, is helping us make that film. So there you go. It all comes together.
Let's keep an eye out for those.
I have another film I was the producer on called Catcher by Chris Scotchkopol, and that stars Rigo Garay, Ella Ray Peck, and John Sparadakis, and Elaine Ferris. But those three that I first mentioned are all in Blackout. So, speaking of sharing and building a community, or just being stuck with each other, however you want to look at it, check out Catcher. That'll be out soon. And I guess that's a psychological thriller as opposed to a horror movie, but they're all related. These are movies about that are visceral, personal, and hopefully rad filming. And I'm not going to make a mummy movie. I just want that on the record.
I can't wait to see your face when you realize what's happening.